Welcome to AMC Rewind. I'm Alicia Malone. This is the show where we look back at some classic, older, maybe forgotten movies. Now, my co-host, Jon Schnepp, he is busy with his movie, which is actually out right now. So go to tdoslwh.com to find out all the details. I did it.
Yes, good job.
In his place is AMC's very own Mark Ellis.
That's right. And in 20, 30 years, when Alicia's still hosting Rewind, we're going to be talking about the death of Superman Lives. What happened?
It's going to be on Rewind.
And joining us is a special guest. He is my Profiles co-host, also movie reviewer on Access Hollywood, Mr. Scott Mantz.
It's always great to be here talking movies with Alicia Malone and my buddy Mark Ellis.
I just hope this doesn't turn into a trivia battle because I'm going to get buried.
No, it's only you're all going to get buried if we start talking movie dates.
Oh, God, don't bring that up.
Dates that kill you.
Don't mess with Mantz on dates. Now, for this week's theme, we thought of a bit of an interesting idea. Actually, Mantz suggested this. To look at the work of Paul Newman, but specifically through two films where he played the same character. But first up, let's just talk a bit about Paul Newman. What can you say about the man with the baby blue eyes? I mean, he was an actor, a director, racing car driver,
salad dressing connoisseur,
philanthropist, activist.
Yep.
Such a guy and so many iconic roles.
I feel like he's like Harrison Ford. He's the type of guy, he's dashing, he's charming, women love him, and men want to be him.
Yeah.
You know, he's also a bit, especially back in the 60s when he was doing HUD and Cool Hand Luke, and what movie we're going to talk about today, he was like a rebel without a cause.
Ugh. And he's so good at playing heroes and anti-heroes. Mark, what do you love about Paul Newman?
He also had a timeless quality about him where you even watch him today and you know that guy's a movie star. That's one of the greatest movie stars we've ever had. And one of my favorite movies of his is The Hustler, which we're going to talk about, but also something like The Sting or Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. When you get to see the the piercing blue eyes, it's like this guy got so many genetic gifts, but he still brings an everyman quality about him where you can watch him on screen and you still feel you can relate to that guy and you can put yourself in his predicament because he always played a pretty pragmatic, shrewd guy. He was never too much of a superhero to where I couldn't be like, he was grounded.
He was very flawed too, and he's an actor who got better with age. When you look at a movie like The Verdict from 1982, that is a masterpiece, and that is a movie that he absolutely should have won an Academy Award for. Took another 4 years for that to happen, as we will talk about today.
Yeah, I love Cool Hand Luke. I also love him and Robert Redford in Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. I have them on my lock screen on my phone just so I can stare at them. Just rugged, handsome men, you know, real men. And Paul Newman changed people's lives. Such a great actor and someone who really cared about his craft.
Definitely.
Well, I'm glad you got two rugged, handsome men to talk about these movies.
I know, I'm so lucky.
You're the rugged, and I'm handsome.
I'll take that.
So let's take a look at the work of Paul Newman through the character of Fast Eddie Felson. Rewind recommends watching The Hustler, released in 1961, directed by Robert Rossen, starring Paul Newman as Fast Eddie Felson, a pool hustler who wants to break into the big leagues of high-stakes hustling. Also starring George C. Scott, Piper Laurie, and Jackie Gleason as Minnesota Fats. Fat Man, you shoot a great game of pool.
Wait, so do you, Fast Eddie.
So do you,
that
Fast
is
Eddie.
A great, spoiler alert, ending for that movie. But before we get to that point, you know, Fast Eddie Felson is a hustler. He is also a loser. He meets a woman played by Piper Laurie, who is also a loser herself, and together they save each other's souls. But Fast Eddie just doesn't get it. He just doesn't get what he has, and he wins the battle but loses the war. He realizes when it's too late that he blew it.
And it's really one of the themes that you see in any sort of hustling movie, whether it's playing pool or playing cards or basketball, is that if you are hustling somebody, sometimes you have to lose in order to win, and sometimes when you win, you really lose. One of my favorite things about The Hustler is just that opening frame. You're rooting for this guy. Even though you don't want to, as the movie goes on, you start to see a lot of character flaws. You can't help but pull for Fast Eddie, and a lot of that has to do with how we meet him. He's such a cool, suave guy, and you know exactly who this guy is, what's going on in his head, that he's got all this talent, but he's also also got a lot of other stuff going on there, and the wiring isn't always good.
The wiring is not good, particularly because he does not know when to quit. Not just the game, but he doesn't know when to stop drinking.
Yeah.
That's what does his undoing when he first takes on Minnesota Fats at the beginning of The Hustler, the first 25 minutes of that movie, when the game just keeps going and going and going, and he is kicking Minnesota Fats' butt left and right, and the game just keeps going and going, and it gets to a point where he's had too much to drink and he starts getting way too cocky and arrogant and full of himself. And then there's that great scene where Eddie is just practically passed out, and then Minnesota Fats, played by the amazing Jackie Gleason, who did a lot of his own pool shots in this movie,
Wow.
goes into the bathroom, gets washed up, walks out with this smirk on his face, gets some powder. Fast Eddie, let's shoot some pool. And then that's just when he loses miserably. He loses almost everything. He has to pick himself back up again. And then he meets Piper Laurie at a bus station. And they get into this relationship because they are more alike than unalike. They're both losers, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And
It's a relationship where you really get to see the more self-destructive side of Fast Eddie. And as you're saying, Mark, Paul Newman brings such a relatable quality to him, but he's so charismatic that you can't help but like this guy.
That's right. It doesn't matter what situation he's getting into, whether you watch him and you know he should stop drinking or he should stop playing pool, he should take it. When he keeps saying that the game's not over until Minnesota Fats says it's over.
Yeah.
You're like, no, dude, you're up 18 grand.
It's like,
you know how
go.
much money that was in 1961? Just leave. But he can't do it. And when he gets into that relationship with Piper Laurie, you know that they can't really commit to each other, but they can't really leave each other either. You know it's probably not going to end well, but they just can't walk away.
The story is based on a book by Walter Tevis, and it was optioned several times for a film, including Frank Sinatra was trying to get it up. Originally,
Old
Paul
Blue Eyes
Newman,
himself.
Old Blue Eyes. Paul Newman originally couldn't do this because he was supposed to be shooting Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor, but then he was supposed to be shooting another movie with Elizabeth Taylor, but Cleopatra ran way over time, over budget, so then he was free to do this. But Mantz, you can't imagine anyone else in this role. He's such a dreamboat too in this.
Absolutely. And the thing about director Robert Rawson, who also co-wrote the screenplay, back in 1961, he was still coming off the House Un-American Activities Committee, where he named names. This was the Joseph McCarthy witch hunt where they were looking for communists. And after he named names, this movie almost served as a very subtle allegory for the way he betrayed the people closest to him. Because in the film, Paul Newman as Fast Eddie betrays the person who was closest to him, Piper Laurie as Sarah. And what's also interesting about, just as an allegory, is around the same time, actually a few years before, Elia Kazan went through a similar phase where one of his best movies served as an allegory for when he named names on the House Un-American Activities Committee. Yes, it was on the waterfront, where that was a little more overt, the way Terry Malloy had to take a stand and be a gang of one.
Yeah.
But just the backstory behind the make of this movie is almost as fascinating as the movie itself.
And the interesting thing about Rawson's career is that he initially didn't want to name names. And I think that he learned, much like Paul Newman's character is going to learn in The Hustler, is that sometimes you do have to lose in order to win. You have to concede the battle in order to win the war. And so you can even almost look at George C. Scott's managerial character as like a McCarthy in this film, if you really want to get that deep.
Burt
but
Gordon.
It's another thing about watching a young George C. Scott, because growing up as a kid, I first met Paul Newman literally because I got a salad at Wendy's. Who knew I would do that? And I got some of the free Newman's Own dressing, and my mom's like, "That's Paul Newman." I'm like, "Who's Paul Newman?" And then she gave me the whole backstory.
George he's an actor.
I first met George C. Scott when he was in 1984's A Christmas Carol as Scrooge, and then you go back and you see him in Patton. But this is such an incredible performance, and it's great to see a young George C. Scott on screen.
And The Hustler was nominated for Oscars in all 4 of the acting categories, but George C. Scott became the first actor to decline a nomination. He said that the awards were demeaning and self-serving.
That's back when men were men.
Men.
This movie got, 9 Oscar nominations and it won 2 for cinematography and art direction. But Paul Newman absolutely should have won an Oscar for this film. There's so many movies he did, like Cool Hand Luke or The Verdict, where he should have won the Oscar. But it was a few years later, in 1986,
which we're about to get
into, where ironically, he's playing the same character from 25 years before.
Yeah.
This is a very big deal. The Color of Money, directed by Martin Scorsese.
Wait, because I have my my facts on that.
Okay, you go.
Stand
you go,
down,
Alicia
Mance,
Malone.
but
Darn.
What week did Color of Money come out?
What was October of 1986?
He's amazing.
Unbeatable.
Oh my God! It was October 17th,
You
1986.
are incredible
Come on,
with your
give it
dates.
up. Give it up. There you go. High
One
fives
last thing.
all around.
One last thing about The Hustler before we move on. Mark, me and Schnepp often talk about black and white.
Yeah.
And how it's used and how sometimes, it doesn't mean that it's an old film. This was in 1961. What do you think the black and white does for this movie?
I think what's amazing about the way this film is shot as a whole. Well, first of all, I love the way that you can see Jackie Gleason actually is the guy making those shots.
Yeah.
Because I'd seen this movie and then I heard that Jackie Gleason did all of his own stunts, if you want to call them in that. And then you watch the film through that prism and you're like, wow, that's really amazing. When you watch this movie in black and white, it so clearly paints these characters. And then as you get further in, it almost like it tricked my eye a little bit because, again, I was rooting for some people. And then as you get further into the character of Paul Newman, it gets more and more into a gray area.
It's true. Yeah, I like that.
Well, it's also,
Very well
I feel
done.
like the black and white aspect gives it a gritty feel.
Yep.
It gives it a sort of sleazy feel,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the backs of the docks where these totally gritty, scary pool halls that you would not want to be caught dead in,
Yeah.
where he goes to and almost does get his butt kicked and his knuckles broken. So the black and white aspect, it gives it a timeless feel. And even though they could have done it in color, the black and white aspect, especially when you're watching it in high definition, it just looks like it could have been shot today.
It's beautiful. Beautiful looking. All right. Now let's get into the next
Color
one.
of Money.
25 years later, Paul Newman reprised his role as Fast Eddie Felson in The Color of Money, released in 1986, as Matt said, directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Paul Newman and Tom Cruise, who plays a young pool hustler mentored by Fast Eddie. It picks up 20 or so years after the
25.
events in The Hustler, based on another novel by Walter Tevis. Won the Best Actor Oscar for this, for Paul Newman.
Right.
Do you think that was also kind of for The Hustler?
Well, again, I feel like that was for his career because there were so many other movies that he should have won for. I mean, The Verdict should have been the movie that he actually won an Oscar for. And the year before he won the Oscar for The Color of Money, he was given an honorary award by the Academy to honor his body of work. And then he comes out with The Color of Money, in which he reprises his role as Fast Eddie Felson. So, yeah, it's a great performance, but I feel like his Oscar win for The Color of Money was also an Oscar win for The
everything.
Hustler and Cool Hand Luke and all these other great films.
Yeah.
I feel like The Color of Money almost takes a shift in the third act towards getting Paul Newman that Oscar because I'm watching it and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be Paul Newman mentoring Tom Cruise. And then for the last third, we're really going to get to know more about Tom Cruise's character and how he handles being in the spotlight. And it really ends up being more about Fast Eddie Felson
Absolutely.
and his return to playing pool.
It brings him back because at the beginning of The Color of Money, it had been years since he was in a pool hall. Even the character played by John Turturro was like, when was the last time you went on the road? 1961? So that last scene in The Hustler, when Burt Gordon says, don't ever step in a pool hall again. I mean, that's when he gives up pool and he reinvents himself as a liquor salesman.
Yeah.
So it's done very well for him, obviously, because he's driving a really nice car. He dresses really well.
He knows
He's
a
got
lot
cool
about that
sunglasses.
subject, too,
Yeah,
as The
he
Hustler
does.
proved.
But throughout the course of the movie, there's that midpoint where he reinvents himself again as a pool
He starts
hustler.
getting into it
And
again.
what a great scene that sets him off to do that.
Yeah.
When he starts playing pool again, and he's in the pool hall, and the scene where he gets hustled by Forrest Whitaker, when he just realizes
He's so
that,
angry.
and he goes, "Are you hustling me, kid?" And he goes, "No, we can quit anytime we want." He goes, "Are you hustling me?"
Yeah.
And Forrest Whitaker breaks character, just goes, "What? You want to quit?" And he goes, "F you, kid. Rack him." And then he just loses miserably.
Can't let it go.
He can't let it go. And Forrest Whitaker is packing up his stuff, putting the money in his wallet. He goes, "Let me ask you a question. Do you think I need to lose some weight?" And then he walks out. But Tom Cruise and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, who he had been mentoring, see him caught with his pants down like that. It's humiliating. And he goes, "That's it, kid. I got nothing else to teach you. Here's the money. Go. I'll see you in Atlantic City." And he has to reinvent himself. And you're right. It goes from being about this mentoring of Tom Cruise, who was great in the movie, by the way.
He's really good.
He held his own beautifully. But then the way it just comes back to being about Eddie and about reinventing himself, getting back in the game, and that last scene where he just goes, "I'm back."
Yeah.
So awesome.
Well, talking about Tom Cruise, I think this is one of the movies which proved that he's more of an actor that's in line with Paul Newman, someone who cares about his craft, rather than some of the other brat packers of the time. He's so arrogant in this film, isn't he?
Yeah, and it's great this might be the best example I've ever seen of a movie star passing the torch to another movie star. And again, this is hindsight watching this film that came out in 1986, but there's a few scenes when it's like, are Paul Newman and Tom Cruise, are they still talking about pool? Are they talking about Hollywood? Are they talking about what it's like to be the most famous guy on the planet? What it's like to be the most likable movie star on the marquee? I think that when you see the look in Paul Newman's eyes when you're right, when he has that break, when he's back to playing pool, and that's when the blue eyes, that's when the color helps, is when you just see these blue eyes and you see this flicker, this fire that hasn't been there in 25 years, and he looks so excited. That's what got him the Oscar, right? That kind of look right there.
That scene when they're just hanging around, they're just playing pool, and they rack him up, and he picks up the pool cue for the first time in God knows how many years. And that snap, that break, and the camera just zooms right in on him like, whoa, boy, did I miss this.
Yep.
But the thing about Tom Cruise in this movie, I remember when I saw it when I was in high school. Yep.
Werewolves of London.
Yeah.
I love
that scene is great.
Great.
Werewolves in London is like one of my favorite scenes of any Martin Scorsese movie.
And then that Eric Clapton song just gets stuck in my head. It's in the way that you use it. I get it.
That's a great song.
It's a great song that will not leave my brain.
But when I saw that film, I thought I was like, guys, hang on a second. Tom Cruise is a really good actor because he'd done Risky Business, and that summer he also had Top Gun, which made him like a huge star. So, but even that early in his career, he was already challenging himself, working with great actors and directors to say, hey, I'm not just a pretty face. I want to be challenged as an actor. And he held his own with Newman. They complemented each other. They were so great together. And then that scene where he loses, where Paul Newman's character loses, and he's like, gives him they're on the steps, and Tom Cruise's Vincent takes the pool cue, the box, the balabushka, and he like kisses it, throws it down, and starts kicking the stairs and walks away. It's such a feeling of betrayal, and it's so effective.
And Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio really holds her own with these two guys as well. I mean, these are
two.
This is one heavyweight and one up and coming heavyweight. She is some of she is some of the meatiest parts of this movie, and it's great watching her, seeing how young she was during that time, and she'd go on to do other things like Robin Hood, but she really gives a great performance here too.
It's a man's world. It's one of these films that Martin Scorsese, okay, maybe it's not one of his best, but it's still a really good film and a great companion piece to The Hustler.
Absolutely. Well, there's that scene in the Roger Ebert documentary, Life Itself.
Yep.
They show a clip of Roger Ebert slamming The Color of Money.
And they were good friends.
And they were good friends.
Ebert and Scorsese.
And so when Roger Ebert gave the Color of Money a bad review, it cuts to a clip of Scorsese being like, "Wow, that hurt," but hey, he called me on it. And I feel like even at the time, this is before I started seeing movies long before I started seeing them the way I see them now. I still thought it was a very good film, and I saw The Color of Money before I saw The Hustler, and I still liked it a lot.
All right, well, let's go to our anniversary segment now. Rewind remembers that 20 years ago, Village of the Damned came out. This was directed by John Carpenter. It's a sci-fi horror film with the tagline, "Beware the Children," about a group of children born on the same day who grow at a fast rate. They can read adults' minds, and they force them to burn themselves. It stars Christopher Reeve and Kirstie Alley. And then there's Top Dog, which sounds awesome. I really want to see this.
Norris.
Starring Chuck Norris as a policeman who fights alongside a canine companion. Directed by Aaron Norris, who, as you might guess, is the brother of Chuck Norris.
And what how he got that job.
This was Chuck Norris's last film to be released in theaters. The next few went straight to video. Mark, have you seen either of these movies?
I've definitely seen Top Dog multiple times, and Top Dog may have been the worst of the dog cop genre, which isn't a great one to begin with. You have Turner and Hooch with Tom Hanks, and then you have Canine with Jim Belushi and a dog, and then you had Top Dog with Chuck Norris, which is like, dude, you should have made a sequel to Sidekicks over Top Dog. Village of the Damned is one that I watched, and I was intrigued for a while, and it ended up leaving me flat, especially because I was excited to not only see Christopher Reeve, but Mark Hamill, one of my favorite dudes of all time. Luke Skywalker is in the film playing a priest, so that was a big letdown for me.
Village of the Damned I thought was okay. I thought the original was much more effective as a cautionary tale. It was scarier. It was black and white. It had that 50s feel to it. None of these movies really struck me as ones that I would really want to see again.
Well, funnily enough, 30 years ago, Rewind remembers that Code of Silence came out, which is another Chuck Norris movie. So he had two movies on the same weekend,
10 years
years apart. Norris played a plainclothes police officer who takes down a drug lord. This was the second highest grossing film for Chuck Norris behind Missing in Action from 1984. I haven't seen nearly enough Chuck Norris movies. Have
Maybe
you seen
that's a
this
good
one?
thing.
I think you have seen enough Chuck Norris movies, actually.
Zero is a good
I
number.
tried to watch Code of Silence, and I actually got through Code of Silence okay when I was a kid because I was coming up and I was in the Van Damme and Seagal. Those are the best guys. And Schwarzenegger and Stallone, yeah, they're okay, but I want this new regime. So I tried to get into some Chuck Norris, but all those Missing in Actions, they just felt too hokey might be the wrong word, but they didn't pull off the action as believable as I wanted, even though you can still tell Chuck Norris had some talent as an actor, and obviously he can beat the crap out of most anybody on the planet to this day. So there's some credibility there, but I just never really got into his films.
I did when I was really young, like The Octagon. Remember that one? I saw that when I was a kid, and obviously Enter the Dragon. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Bruce Lee movie. So, but the older I got, the less interested I got in Chuck Norris's later films, like Top Dog. Not a man's classic.
I just
You
love all
don't have
those
a Top Dog
jokes.
shirt?
Yeah.
No, I don't have a Top Dog shirt.
Sure, you got everything else?
I got everything else.
You got any other Chuck Norris ones?
No Chuck Norris tees.
I did see
got a lot of
Sidekicks in the
tees.
theater, though.
Oh, did you?
I saw Sidekicks in the theater, yeah. Me and a bunch of my friends in like 8th grade or whenever it came
Was
out,
it
we went on a
93?
date. We took, what's that?
93?
It was 93. It was him and Jonathan Brandis. It was probably around 93.
You
yeah.
went on a date?
We went to. I went on a lot of weird. I went to see Sidekicks, and then I went to see Philadelphia. I think the same year on a date, which is not a great date movie if you're in
93.
8th grade. Yeah.
there you
No,
go.
Philadelphia. It's very depressing.
Philadelphia is depressed. It's good.
It's good.
But it's depressing.
All right. Well, getting away from Chuck Norris, if we must, for a minute,
Oh,
let's go.
can we please do a rewind just on Chuck Norris movies?
We should. Actually, that would be really fun. But let's get back to Mr. Paul Newman. One of his films that not a lot of people talk about, our hidden gem, Rewind reveals Slapshot.
Slapshot.
Which is from 1977. It's a sports comedy directed by George Roy Hill about the Charleston Chiefs, a minor league ice hockey team who become violent to gain popularity. Isn't violence kind of what we like in sports?
In hockey,
Especially
especially.
in hockey, yeah.
This is, I'll tell you, Slapshot is not only an underrated Paul Newman movie, it's an underrated sports movie.
It's
one
funny,
of
too.
It's funny as hell. It's George Roy Hill, who directed Newman and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. This movie is really gritty. It's a perfect 70s film. It is very gritty, very sort of like sleazy. It's totally outrageous. And I know this won't come as a shock to you, but my parents took me to see this movie when it came out in February of
His
1977.
parents took him to the weirdest
The
movies.
weirdest movie, but this was my first
That's good
R-rated
parenting.
movie.
Yeah.
Good parenting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a wonder that I didn't turn out to be kind of messed up.
Yeah.
Or maybe I am. That's why I remember movie dates so well. But Slapshot, I remember being very funny, but also I remember this word being used an awful lot that I'd never heard before.
Sweary
and
word.
it begins with an F and ends with a K.
I know what you mean.
And they are dropping it left and right. And I was like, gee, Dad, what does that word mean? He's like, I'll tell you later, son,
Yeah.
like in a few years. But it was very funny. And remember the Hanson brothers?
The Hanson brothers.
They're
these-
so
These
hilarious.
goons. So Paul Newman is the player manager, and then they hire these Hanson brothers. They're very, very funny. Mark, this is a movie you can enjoy even if you don't like sports.
Yeah, or if you hadn't seen it until very recently, which I always hated to admit that I had never seen Slapshot, and then I hate even more saying it after I have witnessed it because it is such an archetypic raunchy sports comedy.
Totally raunchy,
and it set the
outrageous.
template for a lot of films when you look at something like Major
Major
League
League.
or something as recent as Pitch Perfect because the commentator, somebody doing the action, and there's nobody better. Just like Bob Uecker was my favorite part of Major League, Albert Duncan as the sports commentator
he's
in this film.
hilarious.
He's got so
He's
many great
hilarious.
lines when he's just witnessing all this craziness that's going on around this hockey team. That was a standout for me.
Well, watching Paul Newman in this film made me think, boy, he must have had a lot of fun making this. And when I was looking back on IMDb and everything like that, I saw it quoted in numerous places where of all the movies he made, this was the one he had the most fun doing.
And he
you
said he
could
never
tell.
really swore before making this movie. And then afterwards, he swore a lot because it was so much fun.
And that's one of the great things about Paul
was
Newman
liberating.
too. When you're watching this film, he lets everybody else. It's kind of like what Phil Hartman was able to do on Saturday Night Live for so many years. Is I'm going to let everybody else be the star. I'll get my laughs, but I'm going to let
Right.
everybody else have their scene. Just because I'm the most famous guy, just because I'm an Oscar caliber actor, I don't need to chew up all the scenery. I can let the Hanson brothers do their thing. I can let everybody else have the laughs, and I'm just going to be able to be the glue that holds this movie together.
And it really was, and it made it feel like more of an ensemble. Even though, I mean, it feels like a Paul Newman movie, but at the same time, you're right. He's not in every scene. Other characters do have their moments to shine. That's the mark of a great actor. He lets everyone else have their time in the sun too.
It's also interesting how it looks at sports as being kind of this carnival, this sideshow, this traveling thing that's for amusement. I remember I went to my first ice hockey, and we call it in Australia ice hockey, field hockey, so ice hockey. I went to a game in New York, and I couldn't believe that they just let them fight. Like everyone just stood back and waiting. Oh, when you're ready, well, then we'll continue the game.
And this was also at a time when hockey players did not wear helmets. They did not. I mean,
So much
now
blood.
they do, but back then, maybe one of them once in a while would. But all the characters, all the players on the field, on the ice, none of them were wearing helmets.
It's not a lot of these dudes who would pass the concussion test.
No.
But it's such a fun movie. It's so wild, and even though it feels like a '70s movie, and it has that gritty, uncompromising, outrageous feel to it. It still does not feel dated. Maybe the music makes it feel a little bit dated.
Yeah.
But it's still so fun.
One could say it's the top dog of hockey comedies.
Oh, or not, or not.
Probably shouldn't say that ever.
Or not, Ellis.
Try the meal.
It's the best in
Ellis
town.
is available at all
Hey.
times. Yay. All right, so those are our recommendations. This weekend, if you feel like a bit of Paul Newman, you should watch The Hustler, followed by The Color of Money, and then Top Dog. No, then you should watch Slapshot. Let us know what you think, and also let us know your favorite Paul Newman films. I like reading the comments below, so write me something nice. Something nice.
Something nice, folks. Be nice.
Mark Ellis, where
Be
can
nice.
people find you online and maybe doing your yuck jokes?
I'm doing my yuck yucks. You can find all my tour dates for the summer at markellislive.com and on Twitter and Instagram at 5150Ellis. Thank you guys so much for letting me hang with you
Thanks
guys.
for
I'm a big fan of
coming.
what you guys are able to do, and I get to talk about movies that I know are great as opposed to movies that I hope are great.
No, that's really great. And people should go and see you do stand up because it's funny.
He's a funny guy.
Really
this guy.
good.
This guy's
Thank
funny.
you.
Love him.
He's
Give
seen
it
me in
up
LA.
right here.
Alicia's
Yes.
seen me in Tennessee.
Yeah.
We're globe travelers here.
Yeah. And Mr. Mantz, where can people read your stuff, find you online, and also listen to profiles?
Well, let's start with just follow me on Twitter at Movie Mantz. And with the lovely and talented Alicia Malone, I get to host and produce profiles.
This is my full title, by the way. The lovely and talented.
It is her full title, the lovely and talented Alicia Malone. Together we host and produce Profiles with Malone and Mantz. Make sure you go to Facebook, our Facebook page, Profiles with Malone and Mantz,
Good work.
and follow us and like us. Catch our show on the Popcorn Talk Network, where we profile the greatest filmmakers, actors, and directors and actresses of all time. And you can also read my reviews, my film reviews on AccessHollywood.com. And I'm also reviewing movies on Access Hollywood every weekend.
Awesome. Thank you both for coming. Thank you for watching. You can find me at Alicia Malone on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, annoying people on Periscope too. People hate it here. Until next time, share AMC Rewind with your friends, and I'll see you soon.